Sara Hely from the North East Node Riverine Plains, who's going to talk about renewable energy opportunities in agriculture. Thanks, Sara.
No worries. I'll just forward this on, shall I? All right. So I have to switch it on, do I? How's that? Can everyone hear me? That sounds much better. All right. So the question you're probably wondering is, what does renewable energy have to do with building farmers' resilience in future climate extremes? And I'd like to go back to the original intention of the Drought Hub and some of that sentiment that was bandied around when the Drought Hubs were in formation, and perhaps things that were being said about saying, well, the government doesn't want to do any more handouts in drought. This is about preventing a point where you get into an emergency and you need to do handouts. And so I think what we're trying to do with the idea of renewable energy in agriculture is actually build that resilience, not just in a farm scale, but across a community. So this quote about, it's a bit outdated now, but we've all heard it before: give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. So that was really the intent behind looking at renewables in agriculture, to build community resilience, but also to look at whether we could build resilience in our farming systems groups, in that sort of funding model that farming systems group rely on. And so I wanted to just talk a little bit about that. We know that farming systems groups have been in existence for a long time, and they have played a really critical role in terms of identifying knowledge gaps for their region and then being able to address them. But it is no secret that farming systems groups have struggled to remain viable in certain times and certain funding environments. So they do play a critical role in terms of us building resilience in communities. And I think one of the really exciting things about the Vic Drought Hub, and not all of the farming systems groups were in the same boat, but for Riverine Plains, the ability to get a continuous and reasonably good income stream through the Future Drought Fund allow the ability for that organisation to grow in capacity and people and the impact that they were doing, to the point where now it can look for things to become self-sustaining. And that was really the intent behind the work around renewable energies. What if, in an ideal world, we could identify a free resource and turn that into an income stream that could not only support individual farms, farming communities, but also the farming systems groups that are there to service those groups? What if we could do that? And we know that resilience comes from having reasonably good cash reserves or diversified incomes. And that helps the individual farm or the community to fare better in extreme climates. We also, when we did our initial engagements, verified that with our members and farmers and farming communities. They did fare better if there was financial resilience. And traditionally, when we think about financial security, we think about potentially having an adult farm member getting a job off site to supplement the income, looking at mixed farming enterprises, adding livestock, or even adding in storage and other options. But we wanted to come at this from a completely different viewpoint. We know the energy market in Victoria in particular has changed. We know there's an increase in emergence of what we call green credits, or the environmental social governance freight train that is coming towards us. And so could we capitalise on these changes to look at whether there is a renewable energy model that could actually reduce our reliance as a farming systems and a community on potential handouts, if you want to use that terminology? There's a lot to unpack in that no more handout statement. And so what we wanted to do was commission a study to look at whether we could use a free resource like sunshine, be it coming with a fair amount of infrastructure cost to capture it, to increase not just farmers' income, not just their communities, but potentially a not-for-profit farming systems group like Riverine plays, allowing us more autonomy, agency to service those communities. So this study had to go through a few layers. First of all, we had to understand whether farmers, what their current level of interest was in renewable energy. And we were looking primarily at solar. We had some sort of unintentional looks at other types of energy as well, but that was the beginning. And then we needed to look at whether it was actually possible, if farmers were interested in installing something like solar panels on unproductive land, what could they do with that energy? Was the infrastructure there to deliver it to a storage plant, into the grid, or into another facility that could use that electricity? And was the energy profile, meaning when sunshine came in, was it going to match demand from, say, a regional community if we could essentially retail or sell that energy back to a regional community? And then we wanted to look at, well, what sorts of models could do that if we were to secure a significant proportion of a membership base, like in a plain scenario, to install solar panels, capture energy. What sort of model could we build to then create an incentive for a farmer, like a payment back to a farmer to get a diversified income? What model could we then deliver that energy to sell it to a region to make them self-sufficient in a sense? So what are the opportunities and models there? What we found was there was a high level of motivation by farmers who were interested in the renewable energy space. In fact, we had farmers say to us, you know, if there was an opportunity for me to generate electricity, feed it into the grid or into a storage unit, and an organisation like River Plains could sell it back to the region, to other people outside of the farming community, they would even pay a slightly higher price for that than what they're currently paying for grid energy. So there's that much motivation for farmers, if they were to involve, to make a contribution back to community resilience if they could. But there are hurdles. In Victoria, currently, the electrical network or the grid has some serious constraints. In other words, a lot of people in regional Victoria already experience what are called brownouts, so periods where they can't get electricity or the electricity goes down. The actual infrastructure in Victoria is not very good. It's already at capacity. So for a bunch of farmers to put in solar panels and want to contribute to energy to that grid, there's not capacity. So this provides a fairly structural barrier. New South Wales, on the other hand, different story. It's a much better set of infrastructure, poles and wires, available for a model like that. However, there is an opportunity to create what we call local power plants or local storage units. So where you come away from the grid, you can generate electricity, put it into a local storage point, and what that could do is actually decrease the pressure on an already overloaded energy network in Victoria. In New South Wales, this is less of a problem. But what we'd also found is that actually farmers aren't that interested in electricity or reducing their electricity bills, because most farmers are actually more dependent on diesel and the cost of that than they are on electricity. That isn't always the case in irrigated systems where farmers might use electricity to drive pumps. Their bills tend to be a lot higher. So while that motivation might not be as strong, it doesn't rule out that there's an opportunity to offset that. And finally, related to the other 2 points, that while we might not be able to offset or reduce their overall energy bill, we can look at how that energy could be distributed into things like producing local hydrogen or producing local urea, which are also very high carbon footprint energy requirements. Just conscious of time, so I'm wrapping up. So what does this mean? The bad news is that we still have this structural problem in Victoria with the infrastructure. So there is a requirement for ongoing discussions around that with government to try and improve that. And that's going to benefit everyone in regional communities to get really reliable energy supplies. But what can we do locally is that we can get investment into what is called small scale solar and battery V power plants. I can't remember what the V is. Shouldn't put acronyms into a presentation. And you can just simply put, to get that happening, an expression of interest out to investors to build this infrastructure to make that happen. So that's something we could look into straight away. The opportunity here is to say, well, how can other groups, not just Riv Plains or the North East, benefit from this? So we intend to make this report, and there's a lot more detail in that available to the network and to the public, so that they too can look at whether this is a viable option. And that's the end. Thank you.
A topic very close to my heart, because sustainability sits in my portfolio here at Deakin. And if you haven't seen it already, we've got 14 hectares of solar panels just behind this building over the hill there. Oh, there we go. I was going to welcome Cam back up, but he's already on the front foot. Well,
Trying to save you some time.
the presentation title